Hello and welcome to another episode of the AgeTech Podcast. Today we're diving into a topic that doesn't always get the spotlight, but it absolutely should. When people think about the challenges in senior living, they often think about resident engagement, staffing shortages, or communicating with families. But what they don't see are the behind the scenes challenges, the complex world of compliance and quality assurance. These are the kinds of problems that only industry insiders truly understand. Yet they have a massive impact on operations, risk management, and ultimately the care residents receive. My guest today, Sarah Richard, is the founder and CEO of Vara, a startup that's tackling compliance head on. And she's also the force behind AgeTech NYC, AgeTech SF, bringing together a growing community of innovators in the aging space. In this episode, we unpack how AI and automation can help senior living operators navigate these challenges. What Sarah learned from embedding herself in a senior living community as an entrepreneur in residence, and what founders should be asking themselves when getting started and choosing a challenge to work on. We have a lot to unpack, so let's dive right in. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Karen. I'm so thrilled to be here. Yeah, happy to share a little bit more. So I am founder and CEO at AgeTech NYC, the community of 700 plus members working to make New York the best place to grow older. But as we were kind of chit-chatting earlier, I am moving to San Francisco. So I have just landed here in SF and working with a couple folks on the ground here to spin up AgeTech SF to really drive towards a similar mission to make San Francisco an incredible place to age. That's all kind of in my community organizer side of what I do. But the other element here is I am founder and CEO at a company called Vara. And what we do at Vara is we build task management tooling for directors of nursing and administrators at senior living, with a particular eye towards taking care of quality assurance tasks, whether that be QAPI for skilled nursing or more informalized quality assurance programs for assisted living.
That's amazing. And as part of your entrepreneurial journey, you took part in an EIR program in one of the major senior living providers. So how's that like?
The most unbelievable experience. I cannot say enough good things. So what I did is an entrepreneur in residence program that is run through United Church Homes in Ohio. And kind of the leading team there is Mike Hughes, as well as Linda Daly, who is the executive director at the community on the ground. And I believe I was the fifth or sixth entrepreneur to take part in this program. And I spent about 2 weeks living in a community called Glenwood, just in Marietta, Ohio. And the team were kind enough to set me up with an independent living apartment, truly embedded me in the daily operations. So I shadowed anyone and everyone kind of on the ground, whether that be the activities director, the director of nursing, all kinds of folks, the person charged with maintenance, Linda herself from an executive director perspective, really to get a better understanding of the daily operations, really what on the ground is happening at a senior living community. And the great thing about United Church Homes is they have the full continuum of care. So I spent time at Glenwood, which is their assisted living and independent living side, but I also got to head over to their skilled nursing, Harmer, and kind of get to know the team there and understand a little bit better the operations as well. And the fun thing about that entrepreneur in residence program, the obvious, which is getting to spend time with the older adults in the community, getting to spend time with, all the folks who work there. But the fun thing besides all of that is we do seem to have something of an AgeTech NYC pipeline. So there's a couple of folks in the AgeTech NYC community who have preceded me. And I do believe that there's interest from others in taking part as well thereafter.
That's amazing. So first of all, I have to mention that we already invited Michael and Linda to the podcast.
Yes.
So anyone watching or listening to this, subscribe to the show so you'll get a notification when that episode is live. And I love that you took part in this program, and I love that United Church Home is offering it, because there has to be a lot of overhead in it for them to have a founder shadowing people around, asking lots and lots of questions. How were you received by the staff, like on the ground there?
With open arms. I have nothing but positive things to say. I do think that it is in part due to the fact that I was the fifth or sixth. So, folks had gotten a chance to get comfortable with the program, understood what it meant to have an entrepreneur in residence. So it wasn't kind of a net new experience for the folks living at Glenwood or the folks working at Glenwood. And I do have to note, the team at United Church, they've dotted their I's, crossed their T's. So I signed a BAA to make sure that everything would be very appropriate from the standpoint of legal concerns, just make sure, the community is protected, just everything is lined up from that regard.
BAA is like the business associate
Associate
agreement.
Sure. Yeah. Just to make sure that, folks could speak freely in front of me without any concerns, that I was truly kind of under the hood. And it's so exciting that you're going to speak with Mike and Linda. I'm thrilled for your audience to get to hear more from their perspective about the program. But again, from my perspective, it was about 2 weeks. We spent the first week really just in sponge mode, kind of learning. I was shadowing all of the folks on the ground, kind of forming opinions on how things are run, how do the daily operations work? And then the second week was quite a bit more focused on my specific testing. So, really speaking with the folks who would use my product, really getting a bit more deep dive from there. And all of it culminated in, of course, I walked away with this incredible experience, but we do, thanks to Mike, get to hopefully give back a little bit to the community by writing a culminating memo of what did we see, what opportunities for continuous improvement, what was fantastic already, really just deep dive on how the experience went.
So when we spoke a few months ago, you already were working on Vara and you had sort of a hypothesis on what opportunity was in it for you and what problem you were going to be solving. And sort of, did you go into this experience with a mission to test this hypothesis? Did you find anything that surprised you that was like counterintuitive that you never would have known otherwise?
Yeah, I think the biggest learnings for me were really around the daily operations and the language. And those are things that you can't really get from an outsider's view. It's more so, sitting in the proverbial water cooler talk. How are people talking about their daily operations, right? So when I think you and I initially spoke, I was so early in formulating what was my hypothesis. I knew there was something around compliance that was deeply painful for operators. And that does come from the work I did last summer, speaking with about 25 senior living communities, from the C-suite to the director of nursing to the residents in varying degrees to better understand what's hard about senior living right now. And I think what you and I discussed at that time is everyone and their mother feels that staffing is a challenge, right? We're in a notoriously tight labor market, Medicaid acting as an effective wage cap that overall impacts the overarching pool, whether or not you do have a Medicaid population. And that leads to, when you have 65 to 80% of your staff walk out the door every year, what falls between the cracks? It is your attention to policy and procedure in ways that leave you wide open for risk, whether that be the $10,000 a day fines, civil monetary penalties, whether that be the $1 million plus class action lawsuits. And what it comes down to at the end of the day is documentation and is your quality assurance process. So again, when you and I initially spoke, I knew there was something thorny, something hairy there, but it did take experiences with the 8 design partners I've been working with, and in particular with, this entrepreneur in residence program truly being on the ground to really get a feel for what is the actual pain point and how can I best solve it.
Absolutely. And in your conversations with the staff on the ground, did you find that frontline workers are less concerned about compliance than management, which I guess that would be like my intuition? They're just trying to get things done and not really trying to cross their T's and dot their I's?
It's a great question. So what I'll say in particular at Glenwood, I noticed is top of mind for every single person in the door is resident quality of care and resident satisfaction. So the good news is that is top of mind for every single person. I think the challenge comes with what performance metrics almost are you held to, right? And how kind of are your processes enabling to a quality assurance process or not? So with Glenwood, again, I feel very fortunate that this was a very high quality community. So I feel like I did see kind of best practice. But even still, with all of my design partners and with all of the communities that I've gotten to know, I've noticed there's a ton of pen and paper kind of manual work that things do fall between the cracks. And, I've heard sort of anecdotally that in the the three lawsuits that I'm aware of that kind of did on win, that the full-on kind of result was the skilled nursing community or the assisted living community won the lawsuit outright and, no settlement, nothing because of the documentation at the end of the day. So I'm really heartened to kind of hear those stories and know that what I'm working towards is the ability to hand every single community their own documentation.
That's amazing because, we talk a lot about the labor shortage and staffing crisis, and that is sort of intertwined with the paperwork, the insane amount of paperwork that everyone in senior living has to deal with. And I feel like it is sometimes the thing that really burdens people so much to the point that it does or could cause turnover. So
Absolutely.
potentially, like, you could be also fixing some of that problem as well.
I'm hesitant to make that as a promise, but what I will say is a community that I've been working with, sort of back of envelope, estimated that my tool is going to save his administrator 60 hours a month. And that's unbelievable. That time could be spent with sort of FaceTime with residents, with really any number of other things. So I am really excited to drive towards being able to prove that out as a proof point.
Wow, that is amazing. 60 hours a month. That is like
60 hours
an
a month.
extra 30%.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
And it is very fascinating. I come from a bit more of a traditional tech background. My prior roles were head of product at an early stage fintech. And it is really fascinating for me to come from that more high tech crypto AI kind of slant and realize how much senior living and older adults aging have just been not served at all or fully misserved. A lot of what we've seen so far, in my opinion, is really tech-enabled services, which is awesome. That is a fantastic stopgap. But when we are in such a tight labor market, we cannot be reliant on the services part of tech-enabled services. We really do need to be full stack, full tech.
And do you think that the AI is going to take us to that next milestone? Because I feel like a lot of startups right now, not necessarily in AgeTech, but in other highly regulated fields in which labor is in short supply, are really trying to work on dealing with paperwork and dealing with everything you can delegate to a machine right now using LLMs.
Yeah, I absolutely think that AI can help kind of mitigate the current gap that we have. I would say by no stretch does it replace a labor force, but it certainly augments, right? When we think about what we can do with LLMs, even from the stance of, the RAG functionality is fantastic. And for those who might not be aware, RAG effectively is a way for you to really customize the output from a language model. And that gets me really excited from the standpoint of how can we take into account that certainly within senior living, certainly within aging, every case is unique and different. But when we do abstract a little bit one level up, we do find commonalities in ways that AI can really help mitigate a ton of paperwork, mitigate a ton of kind of overhead. And, actually a lot of the work that I've done in the past couple of months has been building out custom tooling for various senior living communities because we do have that functionality right now, whether that be some level of expedited sales flow, a more streamlined CRM, more streamlined billing functionality. How can we automate the boring stuff and automate the paperwork so that the people we've hired to do good work actually get to do the good work?
Absolutely. And like you said, everyone, at least everyone that I've met that goes into this line of work is like their top priority is to provide good care, whether it is to residents in senior living or whether that's care in the home. Mm-hmm. And because these industries are regulated, some more, some less, there is a lot of paperwork involved. And, when you go into this line of work, you're like a people's person and not a paperwork person, and definitely not the type that wants to sit in front of the computer 60 hours a month typing in whatever it is you got to type in because the regulations mandate it. So I love that technology is finally like able, like you said, to mitigate a lot of that and to help people do their best work and not feel like I spent 3 hours today with the computer that I could have spent with residents.
Exactly. I mean, even when I think through some of the most classic workflows that I know of in senior living. Yeah. Case number one being I am a senior living salesperson and I am working with a place for mom lead referrals. The fact that the current workflow is so manual with, manual touch points, I receive a lead and I'm going to go call them myself and have a pretty rote initial conversation. That could be something that a salesperson is freed up from doing. Maybe the first kind of qualifying touch point doesn't need to be a human because that human has a lot more on their plate that they could be better served focusing on. Number two being, of course, I've got to say compliance. A lot of what's done today from a plan of correction standpoint, from a sort of overarching standpoint, is really I'm going to take my 400, 500 policy and procedure pages, pull out my 3-ring binder, flip through to the program that I'm going to run today, my antibiotic stewardship program. I'm going to pull out that sheet of paper. I'm going to write out my audit log by hand, walk through the community, check this, check that. Anything that goes wrong, I'll manually kind of manage that task resolution by email. Oh my gosh, of course, an automated solution could save 60 hours a month, of course. So, of course, there's any number of different workflows that I think are really well positioned to be served by AI, so long as the communities themselves are open to trying.
Speaking about being open to trying, from your experience, you've spoken to many, many senior living operators. In this day and age, in 2025, how open people are to try new stuff. And maybe you're sort of somewhat biased because the compliance issue is so painful and it has clear ROI. So people are more open to trying your solution than, let's say, some solution that vaguely increases resident satisfaction but doesn't have clear ROI.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have only been working in age tech for so long. And even in that amount of time, I have seen leaps and bounds. So when I first started, a lot of kind of operators were not so eager to talk about AI tech generally. But I think even in the past year or so, we've seen a huge opening of the aperture there. And, the kind of leading indicators that give me a little bit of hope here. One is that in the past, say, 2 years, we've seen a net new role in the industry that is, VP, director, what have you, of innovation, of technology. That's something that didn't necessarily exist 5 years ago, certainly not 10. And it's very exciting to see that, communities are kind of putting their money where their mouth is in terms of hiring in people that are equipped to help their communities implement tech for good. The other thing that I've seen that is really, really exciting is an interest and an appetite for education. So it's a little bit too soon to say, but I am working on a certification course with a couple of partners to kind of help senior living communities understand how AI can serve them. So more to come there, but it's really exciting to me that a couple of my partners there are senior living leaders themselves and are saying, you know what? I've seen the light in terms of what tech can do for my community, and I want to make sure that my peers are able to do the same.
Absolutely. So what's next for Vara, or where is Vara right now? We're having this conversation in March 2025. What is the status currently for Vara, and where are you headed?
Such a good question. So where we're at right now is we've completed the kind of initial beta version of Vara, which is to say you can log in, you can upload your policies and procedures and receive an automated survey template. You can complete a survey, you can complete tasks and kind of throughout retain documentation. And we're in the process of onboarding a couple of our design partners right now. So very excited to kind of get their initial feedback. And we are with a wait list that will be starting to onboard pretty soon.
That's amazing. And I assume you'll be commercially available probably by the end of this year or next year?
Certainly. Much sooner than that, but no explicit timeline quite yet. we're kind of trying to take things slow and intentional with the design partners that we do have and the waitlist that we do have.
Amazing. So let's change the subject and talk a little bit about AgeTech NYC and AgeTech San Francisco.
Yes.
So first of all, who is running AgeTech NYC now that you're in San Francisco?
It's a good question. So I'm still head of AgeTech NYC. I do have a couple of key community partners on the ground. I don't know when this kind of podcast is going to come out, but we are having a panel and networking event on March 18th. That's going to be moderated by Peter Elbauer, and he actually was an entrepreneur in residence before me at United Church Homes. So he's been a longtime friend of the AgeTech NYC community, and he's working on a product called Ayla AI. We also have a couple of partners at Primetime Partners who have been really instrumental in supporting the community. So excited to kind of keep building from afar. And my work does take me back to New York quite a bit, but I am excited to start building out AgeTech SF with the same level of, eye towards growth and intentionality, and making sure that we have all the folks who care about aging at the table here in SF.
And you mentioned when we started the call that you just got there. What did you find in San Francisco in terms of who is coming to AgeTech San Francisco meetups?
Yeah. Well, so we're planning something for April, more to come there, but there's been a sort of grassroots effort led by Dan Jung up until now with AgeTech SF. I believe the community is probably around 20 or 30 folks, but I'm really excited to partner with Dan and others here in SF to just hit those growth milestones because, come on, Bay Area is the place for tech. And, California has one of the largest aging populations. We've got number 1 and number 2, respectively, the most skilled nursing and assisted living communities of any state. And certainly CALA has been a wonderful kind of organization on the ground. So AgeTech SF, I mark my words, it's going to be a very, very big community. And we are, a member of the overarching AgeTech communities started by Jeff Gray down in AgeTech Atlanta.
Awesome. So what advice do you have for entrepreneurs starting out in this space from everything that you've seen so far? Maybe some of the opportunities that you learned of in your journey so far. What would have been your second startup idea that you did not jump on because you're sold on the compliance part?
Yeah. So first of all, I have to tell you that my slant is regulation all the way down. I come from a fintech background. It's some of my former coworkers called me sort of the compliance nerd. So I do have to admit my bias there. I would say in terms of advice to a founder, you have to really be so radically honest with yourself. I have had the hardest conversations with myself in the past year when I have gone down a path that was not actually meeting the needs of the user. So I think even right after we first met, maybe a year ago, I was working on a completely different idea. It was remote patient monitoring. It was a hardware play. It was, going to compete with the greats of Safely You and Inspiron. And you know what? That was not going to be a business that I could build successfully. And it was the hardest thing in the world to have spent months on that idea with a business partner at the time and have to sit and look at my financial projections and my level of interest from design partners and say, this is not going to be a winner. And it has taken me a full year to find what I do believe is going to be a winner. All that to say, if you're a founder out there is maximum pain in your future if you have not sat with true honesty with yourself to look at how realistic are your projections and what is the true level of pain that you are solving for a client, and what are the leading and lagging indicators for you to know really from the jump, is this going to be a successful product? And then I believe the second part of your question was, what else would I be working on? Yeah. So I guess the kind of second need that I've come across is really from a home health standpoint, looking at sort of, I'm hesitant to say business in a box because that I think is a very overused term. But again, automating a lot of the documentation and paperwork that does come with running an agency, particularly from the billing standpoint. That's something I've seen over and over and over again be a need. And I do believe that with the coming swelling of folks wanting to age, whether in place or in a community, we just need more efficient kind of processes to serve those clients.
Absolutely. So still compliance, slightly
Yeah,
different market.
always compliant.
But I think that's great advice. I mean, if your friends used to call you the compliance nerd, and let's be honest, 99% of people would not want to go into compliance because most people would assume that it's boring. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a huge business opportunity there. And I love that you were honest with yourself and you had a discussion about what was like your founder market fit, and you realized I'm the compliance girl. I'm going to build a compliance
It's
startup.
true. I'm a compliance girl. And I think it also, for me, my strengths lie a bit more on the B2B side, on particularly the partnerships and B2B sales side. So again, from a founder market fit standpoint, it does make a lot more sense in that dimension as well. Particularly thinking through some of really exciting initial conversations I'm having with all kinds of other folks in the ecosystem that do serve senior living, whether that be, liability insurance, whether that be, trade associations. Again, from a founder market fit perspective, I do think it's important to have some of those honest conversations earlier. And I suspect that many other founders would have had those kind of honest self-talk moments earlier. But I do tend to have a bit of grit just running at something.
That's awesome. So is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you would like to add?
Oh my gosh. I think the things that I'll add, and again, I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but I am headed to a couple of different conferences later in March. So would love to see any of your audience say hi. I'll be at Senior Living 100. I'll be a shark on the sort of Shark Tank event that they're putting together. I'm really excited for that one. And then the following week, I'll be at Medicarians in Vegas. So again, if any of your listeners will be there, would love to say hi in person.
That's awesome. And I think we have all of these events in our conferences guide for 2025. So yeah, definitely try to meet up with Sarah. She's awesome if you're going to either of those. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to check out my conversation with Michael Scaff, the CIO of Sequoia Living, about how technology is transforming the industry. I'll put the link right here. Until next time, stay humble, stay curious.